Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bookstar Festival of European Literature. I'm Kristina Velevska from the publishing house Antolog, and today I'm talking with Sofia Lundberg from Sweden, a journalist and former magazine editor who made her debut in the literature world with the novel The Red Adresar. Lauded by critics for her ability to, so this is a quotation, sweep readers off their feet and take them on journeys through time and space, laugh and loss. Sofia Lundberg is as critic say, the shining new star of heartwarming Scandinavian fiction. And so far, two of her books have been published in Macedonian. The Red Address book, or Crveniot adresar in Macedonian, and a question mark is half a heart, or Prashalnikot polovina, srce in Macedonia. Both of them published by our publishing house Antolog. So first of all, Sofia, I would like to thank you for being a part of our festival and having this conversation with me. And I would also like to ask you how you are coping in these difficult times for the whole world. How is the current situation in your country, Sweden? And how did you go through this whole period?
Thank you so much for having me. I am so sorry that I couldn't come to Macedonia in person, but during these times it's not possible to travel. And for me as a writer, my life has been pretty much the same, I must say, because I always work from home and I write, so I don't meet that many people. But it has been a heartbreaking period, I think, hearing about all the people that get very sick and all the deaths. And so for me, as for, I guess, all of us, it's been challenging. But in Sweden, we have had the possibility to be outdoors in nature, and I've been outdoors a lot, trying to enjoy the wild, the forest and the sea. And so I find a new way to spend time with your loved ones. I miss the restaurants and the dinners and the conversations. I do, yes.
Yes. And how did the situation with the pandemic affect you as a person and as a writer? How did it affect your work, but also the literature in general from your point of view? Some writers say that because of the situation, they have fallen into a state of apathy, which is reflected negatively on their work. While others say that writing itself is a kind of isolation, so that free time only helps them to be more productive. So, what is your opinion on this, and what is your experience?
Well, it always affects you when you have a sadness in your heart, and I think that it's a challenging time because of all the news and all the events that you constantly read about. And for me, I've spent a lot more time reading the news than I normally do, but I spent less time traveling. So for my work, for my books, I have had a good period. I've been writing. And it's also an escape to go inside literature into the stories that I create. It's an escape from the reality. So when it's hard, writing is some kind of therapy for me.
Okay, undoubtedly, the global coronavirus pandemic will be an inspiration for various literary and artistic work. Probably in the very near future, there will be many books and films that will deal with this topic. Diseases, wars, human tragedies seem to be a source of inspiration always. You write life stories about people affected by various personal and social events. I'm really interested. Is there a chance that story which will appear in one of your works to emerge from the current situation?
Well, not directly, but my next novel that I finished and that will be published in the beginning of the next year here in Sweden, it ends during the pandemic. So I had to mention it somehow, but it's not a big part of the story. And for me and for the future and for coming books, I don't really know if this period will affect me, but I think as I feel right now, I just want the world to get past this and so we can keep living again. So I don't think I will write a lot about it if I would guess, but you never know. I don't know what will come in the next years.
As I mentioned before, the conversation we are having will be shown during the 6th edition of the Bookstar Festival of European Literature. This is very important literary event for our cultural environment. And is held every fall when we invite famous European authors to our country who visit us and present their books. And as I mentioned before, the current situation has forced us to make your visit as an online instead of a physical presence, which we hope we will realize in some other better time. The tools and technology we have today make life and communication much more easier. And even in such conditions, we have the opportunity to organize at least some online events like this one. How can the writers in literature benefit from the development of technology? Does technology make creative work easier or harder?
I am very much pro technology because I think new development and new techniques always makes it easier for us. But as a writer, I don't need much technology to write. I have my computer and that's it. But the possibility to talk to others. I have a very dear friend called Alison Richmond who live in New York, and during the pandemic, we have had contact almost every day. And even though she's very, very far away from Sweden, we can have a daily conversation that is very good for our writing. So I think technique brings people closer together, which is good. It's always good when people it becomes closer, especially in times like this. And I think that's I mean, when you can't spend time with your loved ones and have big dinners and so, you can always use the technique to communicate and to be social.
Yes, that's great. Okay, the idea of the Bookstar Festival is primarily cultural exchange, bringing European values closer to a small environment such as ours, Macedonian, translating great literature and writers into a small language such as ours. As a writer who is still somewhere at the beginning of her career, despite the huge success you have achieved from the very beginning, how much does the translation of your books into as many languages and the presence of such international events as our festival mean to you?
Oh, it means the world to me. It means very much to me. And I have, when I was younger, I've been traveling a lot, and I am a journalist. I always enjoyed meeting people from other cultures. And my idea has always been that people are very much the same everywhere you go. We have the same needs, and there's a lot of love. There's a lot more love than hate in the world. And when publishing my two books in different languages, the Red Address book is published in 36 languages, and I get letters from readers very often, and what struck me is that people write almost this exact same things to me, even though they're from Korea or from the United States or from Macedonia. The messages I get is filled with love, and it's filled with life stories, and it's filled with thoughts and ideas on how to spend more time with old relatives. And it's just fascinating that the thing I thought before I became a writer, that we are very much alike in the world, has been proven to me by all my wonderful readers that write to me. And so I feel that I have many friends in the world, and it's a wonderful feeling to have. So I try to answer every reader that writes to me, and I really enjoy it very much. I do it every day. I talk to someone in some countries in the world, and it's a privilege to be able to communicate with the whole world in the way that I get to do. Yes, I'm very grateful for it. It's just something that I could never imagine happen.
And I'm really curious to know how much do you actually know about our country? Do you know any of our authors, any of our books, any of our costumes?
I know too little, and I had really looked forward to coming to Skopje to meet you and to see the culture and to learn more about the culture. But I must say, unfortunately, I know too little. So I would very much like tips on what to read and what to experience. When I go on my book travels, I get to meet interesting people, and that's one of the best things with my job.
Um, let's talk a little about your books. In the 21st century, it is strange to talk about gender stereotypes, and I believe that in Sweden, the progress in that area is at a very high level. But in our country, and not only in our country, but in the Balkans in general, we're still fighting for gender equality. The main characters in your books are always female. They are strong women who are always one step ahead of their time. What is your view on contemporary female writing, and do such stories of brave and advanced women enhance gender perceptions?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Of course, it's very important with gender equality, and I think my characters are strong, but they have been struggling with things that shouldn't have happened to them. So they're part of a structure that needs to be changed. But it makes me happy when my readers and my publishers sees that they are strong. And for me, as a writer and as a Swedish person, I live by myself, and I've always worked to support myself. And for me, I struggle and fight a lot for female for equality in general. So it's important. And I think, I mean, literature can teach us a lot. So of course, but I'm not very political when I write. My books are isolated life stories, and I try to use a lot of psychology. I'm very interested in psychology, and I've read a lot. So I try to create the story out of the psychological profile I have on my character.
In both of your novels that I mentioned before, the novels that we have translated into Macedonian, we have parallel stories. One that takes place in the past and one located in the present, which eventually merge into an emotional ending. It is very interesting and keeps the readers excited until the very end. especially because the characters are so close and the readers can really identify with them. The historical background of the events in your books is always a different time. World War II, for example. Uh, where do you find these stories? How do you do research so that you can capture the detail of the time you're writing about?
Well, the stories comes to me. There's a little person in my head that tells them to me. I used to say as a joke, but the stories comes to me. I think the theme comes to me first, that I want to write about a certain thing. And the reason why I use the past and the present is that we sometimes in the present don't really understand why we have become the person we have become. So that's the, I mean, when you go to therapy, or you need to dig in your past in order to understand who you have become in the future. And so that's why I work with those parallel times. And for, you know, the historical periods, I'm a journalist, so I love doing research. I do a lot of research and read books and go back to old pictures and to try to make the time and the clothes and the environment and how people talk and the events that happens. I use a lot of research, and I do basically, when I write, I do research all the time. So I double check every fact while I'm writing.
Okay, as I said, characters are the strongest part of your books. They're the most important element, I can say. What is the pattern by which you form characters like Doris and Ellen? Is everything pure fiction, or do you find inspiration in the people, in the women in your life?
Everything is fiction, yes, but I use a lot of personal experiences when I write. And the topics and the themes are something that I'm very interested in. I think it's very difficult to write something and without mixing your own personal experience into it. I think that's also what gives it the heart, maybe. But it's all pure fiction. So yes. It's
Okay,
difficult. It's an interesting question, and it's a difficult question to answer because sometimes even I don't know that I've taken some things from my real life until someone tells me that happened to you, or did you think about that period in your life? And I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I did. But I wasn't really aware of it when I was writing. I was just interested in the theme.
yes. Okay, you as a writer can never be separated from the book. That's normal.
No, the book, I sometimes say, and I really mean that I put a little tiny drop of my soul in the book. So for every book, I feel like I die a little. And that sounds very sad, but I tend to give so much emotional power into the books that it takes away a part of me.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized that on all my book launches, I've had black clothes. It's like a funeral. When the book is finished, it's like I'm giving away a part of myself to the world.
It is very interesting that until some time ago, we here in the Balkans, if exclude classic writers like Peru or Penkvist, for example, we perceive Scandinavian authors as authors of dark thrillers because most of the offer of Scandinavian literature that was available here were thriller books, books with murders, with victims, etc. Now it seems that we have a new wave. Authors like you and Frederick Bachman, authors who write exceptional stories about ordinary people, authors who write about life stories, authors whose books express the most sublime, the most touching feelings. Um, Is this a new trend in Swedish and Scandinavian literature, or only here in our country these books are becoming more relevant now?
Well, we have had a very strong period of crime and crime writers. That's true, and there are some novelists coming that write a bit more heartwarming. I think, for me personally, the world we live in right now, we really need to, we need a lot of love because it's been hard times, and I think what happens in the societies around the world is reflected in literature. And so I do hope, since there's a lot more love than hate in the world, I do hope that there's going to be more writers that write about that, so that we inspire people to be more loving.
Yeah. Have you ever received an offer for a movie based on your book? Would you be interested in something like that? I think that your books, the stories in your books, can make a really nice plot for a good movie.
Yes, yeah, of course, for as a writer to see my book as a movie would be fantastic, but there's no plans what I know of. But I'm hoping. There's been some interest, so we'll see what happens.
Okay, we'll wait for it.
But if I would see the Red Address book on a movie screen, I would cry for sure. I'm not sure I could handle seeing it.
You're working on something new. What can we expect from you next?
So I'm working at the moment with my next book. It's called Like a Feather in the Wind, and it will be published in Sweden in the beginning of next year, 2021. And I will keep writing until I die. This is what I do. I love writing. So I have many, many stories inside that I hope that I can share with all the Macedonian readers too.
Oh, and what do you like more, journalistic writing or this creative?
Oh, I like the creative writing more. Making up stories. It's a privilege to be able to work with that. I like journalism too, but it's very special to write your own stories, and I like it very much. This has been my dream. When I was a little child, I started reading before I started school. I learned to read by myself, actually. I saw letters and I connected them and somehow started to read. And I loved book. It was a passion that I had when I was little, and I always dreamed of becoming an author. So all those years when I worked as a journalist and an editor, I dreamed about being able to write books.
But I believe journalism helped you to make better stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, when you write books, you need to have some life experience. And for me, I've traveled a lot. I've met so many people. I've heard so many interesting life stories while traveling. So without that, I wouldn't be as good a writer as I am today. So I needed those years, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Sofia. And finally, for the end, is there anything you want to say to your readers in Macedonia? And believe me, there are many. Do you have a message for all of them?
Oh, I am so happy and grateful to have you, and I'm so happy that you read and like my books. And I wish I could have been in Macedonia to meet you in person, but I'm sending all my love to you, and thank you so much for reading. Yes, and I look forward to see your beautiful country and to learn more about the culture. I'm very proud to be part of your festival, so I'm very grateful for that. I just wanted to say to everyone to stay safe and stay healthy, and I hope that we will get past this period very quickly. And reading is a good way to travel when you can't travel for real. There's so many places and people in books that you can meet. So I hope that everyone will find some happiness in the books.
I hope that too.
Not just my books, but all. There's so many books. It's really a treasure box. If you read books, you're never alone.